Welcome to Redacted Reality. If the allure of the shadowy, cryptic, and mystical tales captivate you, then please subscribe and hang around. Chapter 1: A Toast to Curiosity. The library loomed in the pale, gray morning light, its stone facade ancient and imposing, like a relic from another time. Ivy crawled up its walls and tangled vines, and rain-streaked gargoyles perched along the edges of the roof, their weather-worn faces locked in eternal grimaces. Lily paused at the base of the stone steps, craning her head to take in the grandeur of the building. Even from the outside, the place exuded an aura of silence and reverence, as if guarded secrets too heavy for the world beyond its doors. Her leather satchel felt heavier than usual, though it carried little more than her notebook and pen. This research, she reminded herself, was a personal quest. It wasn't just about unearthing history. It was about understanding the truth behind Judge Elias Whitaker and, by extension, the house that had drawn her into its enigmatic clutches. But as much as she tried to steel herself, the weight of what she might uncover settled uneasily in her chest. The massive oak doors groaned as she pushed them open, revealing the cavernous interior of the library. The air was cool and carried a faint scent of time-worn paper and polished wood, spiced faintly with something almost imperceptible, perhaps cedar. Warm, golden light filtered through stained glass windows, dappling the worn stone floors with mosaic patterns. The domed ceiling arched high above her, painted with faded murals that time had blurred into a haze of swirling colors. Rows of towering bookshelves stretched into the dim recesses of the building, their dark wood glowing faintly in the light of ornate brass chandeliers. Off to one side of the grand hall, a fire crackled in an elaborately carved stone fireplace. Its glow cast flickering shadows across the walls, softening the library's imposing coldness with radiant warmth. The faint scent of smoke mingled with the woodsy scent of the furnishing, imbuing the space with a sense of comfort that seemed at odds with a chilling undercurrent Lily quite couldn't shake. Near the fireplace stood a small, elegant side table. On it sat a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid and two delicate sherry glasses that caught the firelight in glimmering pinpricks of orange and gold. Lily's boots echoed strangely as she crossed the vast space towards the main desk, her gaze lingering on the fire as it licked and crowed against the sooty walls of the hearth. Somewhere between the quiet crackle of the flames and the glint of the sherry glasses, the tension in her chest eased just slightly. At the desk stood an elderly librarian, sorting through a stack of fragile-looking tomes with the care of someone handling relics. She was rail-thin, her silver hair coiled into a tightly wound bun, and her sharp green eyes fixed Lily with a penetrating gaze as she approached. A sense of quiet authority radiated from her, as though she were a sentinel guarding the library's far-reaching knowledge. "Excuse me," Lily began, her voice almost a whisper, as if afraid to shatter the sacred stillness. "I'm researching someone. Judge Elias Whitaker. He lived here in the late 1800s. The librarian arched a thin eyebrow. "Judge Whitaker," she repeated slowly, her voice low and deliberate, each word carefully measured. "Now, there's a name one doesn't hear every day." She set the books down, her thin fingers brushing gently against their tattered covers. "And why, may I ask, are you interested in him?" Lily hesitated, glancing quickly at the fire and the table beside it, as though searching for some anchor. How could she explain something she didn't entirely understand herself? "I'm curious about his history, and the history of his home," she offered finally, hoping it was enough. The librarian studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Curiosity is an admirable start," she said. Then, after a long pause, she gestured towards the fireplace. "You look chilled. Would you care for some sherry? It helps to banish the cold from the bones on days like these." Lily blinked, surprised. "Oh, thank you. I've never actually had sherry before." she admitted sheepishly, the slightest flush rising to her cheeks. Growing up, alcohol had always been ceremonial in her family, reserved for toasts and special occasions. She wasn't even sure she'd recognize sherry if it weren't labeled. The librarian gave a small, knowing smile, the kind that suggested there was much she could teach, should the opportunity arise. "It's an acquired taste, to be sure," she said, walking over to the small table by the fireplace. Her movements were slow but deliberate, with an air of precision that seemed impossible to rush. "Good sherry doesn't bite, it warms. A fine companion for a long night of reading." She poured a measure of the amber liquid into one of the delicate glasses, the quiet glug of the liquid audible even to the vastness of the hall. Extending the glass towards Lily, she said, "Go on, try it. It might even make the archives feel less daunting." Lily hesitated, then accepted the glass, its weight lighter than she had expected. Holding it to the firelight, she watched the liquid catch the glow in a gentle swirl of amber and gold. Her first sip was cautious, tentative. The flavor was rich and complex, the warmth unfurling slowly in her chest like an ember catching flame. "It's unusual," Lily said after a moment, still unsure if enjoyable was the right word. She took another sip, this one a little bolder. The warmth lingered this time, pushing back the cold that had settled deep inside her. "But it's nice. Thank you." The librarian's smile widened, though her sharp gaze never softened. "Good. You'll need it where you're going." With that cryptic comment, she set the decanter back down and motioned for Lily to follow her into the shadowy recesses of the library. Lily cast one more glance at the fire as she trailed after the woman, noting the way the flames danced along the edges of the decanter, their light flickering and shimmering as if alive. For a moment, she felt the warmth's reassurance, but the farther she walked down from the fire's glow, the colder the air grew, and the creeping unease returned, gnawing quietly at the edges of her mind. The librarian's delicate footsteps echoed through the aisles as they wound deeper into the archives. The tall shelves seemed to close in, the firelight no longer reaching these dark corners. Here, the air felt heavier, chilled with the faint dampness that clung to the skin. The scent of old paper grew stronger, laced with the finest trace of something metallic, like rust or forgotten iron. Lily tightened her grip on the sherry glass she hadn't realized she was still holding. She took another sip and tried to focus as the librarian led her further into a labyrinth of shelves, past darkened alcoves that seemed to hold untold stories waiting to be discovered. They passed shelves that bulged with books bound in cracked leather and ancient fabrics, the spines bearing faded titles barely legible in the dim light. The atmosphere shifted as they ventured deeper, the kindling sense of warmth and comfort replaced by something more solemn, almost oppressive. A shiver crawled up Lily's arms. Even the sherry couldn't banish the chill entirely. Eventually, the elderly woman returned, demonstrating an unexpected litheness as she navigated the narrow spaces of the library. With a wry smile, she beckoned Lily to follow her. "I think I've found a few things that might be of interest," she said. The librarian led Lily through the narrowing aisles of the library, her steps slow and deliberate, the muted creak of her boots on the ancient wooden floorboards somehow adding to the air of suspense. Her hands clasped neatly in front of her as though she had walked this path countless times and knew it intimately. Yet there was something about her demeanor that unsettled Lily. A sense that the older woman's calm exterior concealed a depth of knowledge she wasn't sharing. Municipal records, historical documents, the librarian said over her shoulder without breaking a stride. Her voice was low and even, the words rolling out like a ritual. "You may find what you're seeking in these." The tone was professional, almost dismissive. Yet there was something about her demeanor that unsettled Lily. A sense that the older woman's calm exterior was concealing a depth of knowledge she wasn't sharing. Municipal records, historical documents, the librarian said over her shoulder without breaking her stride. Her voice was low and even, the words rolling out like a ritual. You may find what you're seeking in these. The tone was professional, almost dismissive, as she gestured to a series of warped wooden shelves lined with worn leather-bound books and scrolls. But her green eyes lingered on Lily a beat too long, as if gauging her reaction, testing her resolve. Lily stared at the shelves, overwhelmed with sheer volume of material. "Thank you," she murmured, stepping closer to the records. Yet as she reached out for one of the heavier tomes, she couldn't ignore the sensation that those sharp green eyes were still on her. When she glanced back, the librarian was watching her, not with curiosity, but with something far more calculating. The expression vanished almost immediately, replaced by a polite, unreadable mask. With a thin-lipped smile, the woman added, "History's a curious thing, isn't it? What we document, what we omit. Sometimes it reveals more about us than the events themselves." The cryptic comment made Lily pause, but the librarian turned to begin retreating into the dim recesses of the library before Lily could respond. She left her among the dusty volumes, her footsteps fading like an echo in a canyon. For the next half hour, Lily pored through dry municipal records, her mind divided between the heavy language of the documents and the unsettling presence of the librarian, who she had occasionally caught watching her from across the room. Official land deeds, court proceedings, and tax ledgers filled the pages, each leaving more questions than answers. It wasn't until she stumbled upon a record detailing modifications to Whitaker Mansion that she found something intriguing. One entry mentioned the construction of private subterranean chambers under the house. The purpose of these chambers wasn't noted, but the word private was bolded in a scrawled hand, as if someone had thought the omission significant. Lily's pulse quickened. She began rifling through the shelves for more, pulling old ledgers and creaking bound volumes onto the table. Yet despite the fire behind her, the chill of the library never quite lifted. The librarian's voice broke the silence without warning. "You've taken to the records well, I see," she said, the faintest trace of amusement curling the edges of her words. Lily looked up, startled. She hadn't even heard her approach. "Are you finding what you need?" the librarian asked, her face framed in flickering firelight. "Yes, I think I found something about Whitaker's house," Lily stammered. "Chambers beneath it, though it doesn't say what they were used for." The librarian folded her arms, her sharp gaze unwavering. For a moment, Lily thought the older woman might dismiss the discovery entirely. But then she spoke, her words slower, deliberate. "Judge Whitaker was a man of contradictions. Respected in public, enigmatic in private, he had a fascination with secrets and symbols. You may need to wander further than municipal records if you want the full picture of him." Lily tilted her head, intrigued but wary. "What kind of secrets?" The librarian gave a tight smile. "His ties to the Freemasons are well documented, yes? A Grand Master of considerable renown, but beyond the respectable facade lay other interests. Interests intertwined with knowledge one would most rather keep buried." "I don't understand." Lily's voice was little more than a whisper. Tilting her head slightly, the librarian leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Dig deeper, child. Theology, specifically the theology of the old ones, demons. Their intersections with Masonic traditions are not well documented in the records you've been provided." The strange specificity stunned Lily, and she suddenly felt as though the air itself had shifted, pushing away the warmth of the fire. "Why would that Why would demons have anything to do with Freemasonry? Or Whitaker? The librarian's brow arched faintly, but her expression remained guarded, revealing nothing. Curiosity can be a light in shadowed places, she murmured, but one must ask if they truly wish to see what the light reveals. Her cryptic response left Lily's skin prickling in unease, yet, instead of elaborating further, the librarian merely placed an old, weathered key on the table between them. This unlocks a section of restricted records, the librarian said curtly. Subtext on rituals, interpretations of symbols. The old study wing, 2 aisles down. Take care with what you find. Lily hesitated. Why are you helping me? The librarian didn't answer immediately. For the first time since their interaction had begun, a flicker of genuine emotion touched the older woman's face. A shadow of something like regret, or perhaps even fear. Some things guard themselves, she said softly, before straightening and smoothing the fabric of her cardigan as though cementing her veneer of control. Shall I pour you another sherry to steady yourself for what comes next? Lily shook her head, silently pocketed the key, and turned her attention back to the table. Her hands were trembling again, though she wasn't entirely sure if it was from the cold anymore. When she looked up again, the librarian was gone. The corridor leading to the restricted wing felt darker than the others, the shadows stretching farther into dim light. The key in her hand felt heavier than it had when she'd first picked it up, its aged iron cool against her palm. Lily quickened her pace, her breath shallow as she moved forward, unable to shake the feeling that she was being watched. Somewhere behind her, a floorboard creaked. When she turned to look, the faint, lingering scent of sherry was the only remnant of the librarian's presence.